The first thing my wife said after surviving the car wreck was not my name. It was, "Please don't let him know I'm awake." I was standing outside the emergency room when the nurse pulled me aside and whispered those words. For a few seconds, I couldn't understand her. "Who?" I asked. She glanced toward the half-open curtain behind her. "Your wife." My heart stopped. I had spent the last 3 hours believing that the worst thing that could happen tonight was losing her. I had been wrong. The accident happened on a rainy Thursday evening. My wife, Claire, had been driving home from her office when a delivery van ran a red light and hit the driver's side of her car. The passenger compartment was crushed, the windshield shattered, and the driver's door had to be cut away. When the police called me, I nearly dropped my phone. By the time I reached the hospital, Claire was already in surgery. I sat beneath a fluorescent light, staring at my hands. There was dried blood on my wedding ring. I kept thinking about our last conversation. "Don't wait up," Claire had told me that morning. "You said that yesterday. I have a meeting. You've had a lot of meetings lately." She had smiled, but there had been something distant in her eyes. "I'll make it up to you." I had kissed her forehead. "Just come home safe." Those had been my last words to her before the accident. Now I stood outside the emergency room, wondering why she didn't want me to know she was awake. The nurse lowered her voice. "She regained consciousness about 10 minutes ago. She's confused and frightened. She asked me several times whether her husband had arrived." "I'm her husband." "I know. Then why shouldn't she know I'm here?" The nurse hesitated. "Because she said something else." "What?" She said, "If he asks what I heard, tell him I don't remember." My stomach tightened. "What did she hear?" The nurse shook her head. She didn't explain. Then she walked away. I should have gone into the room immediately. Instead, I stood there, frozen. For 7 years, Claire had been the person I trusted most in the world. We had met when we were 24, back when neither of us had much money and both of us had enormous plans. She had been working at a small architecture firm. I was doing freelance engineering work from a cramped apartment. Our first date lasted 4 hours because we got lost walking through the city. I remember Claire laughing when I admitted I had no idea where we were. "You're an engineer," she said. "Aren't you supposed to know directions?" "I design machines. I don't negotiate with streets." She laughed so hard that night that I knew I wanted to hear that laugh for the rest of my life. Years later, I still remembered it. That was why what happened next hurt so much. I finally entered her room. Claire was pale beneath the hospital lights. Her left arm was wrapped in bandages, and there were stitches near her temple. When she saw me, her expression changed. Not relief. Fear. "Ethan." I moved toward her. "I'm here." She stared at me for several seconds. Then she whispered, "Did you talk to anyone?" "The police. The doctors. Anyone else?" "No." She closed her eyes. I pulled a chair beside the bed. "Claire, what happened?" "Nothing. You were nearly killed." "I know. You told the nurse not to let me know you were awake." Her fingers tightened around the blanket. I was confused. "Were you?" She didn't answer. I wanted to press her. I wanted to demand the truth. But I remembered who she was. This was the woman I had stayed beside when her mother died. The woman who had held my hand when my father had surgery. The woman who had promised me, on our wedding night, that no matter how difficult life became, we would never hide important things from each other. So I waited. Claire finally looked at me. "Ethan," I heard voices. "Whose?" She swallowed. "I don't know." "Where?" "In the car." My heart began pounding. She stared at the ceiling. After the crash, I couldn't move. I could hear people outside. The driver of the van was shouting. The police were coming. She paused. Then I heard another voice. What did it say? Claire looked directly at me. It said, she wasn't supposed to be driving tonight. I felt cold despite the warmth of the room. What does that mean? I don't know. Claire, I don't know. She turned her face away. But I noticed something. Her fear wasn't about the accident. It was about me. And for the first time since I had met her, I wondered whether my wife was keeping a secret that had nothing to do with the wreck. I didn't sleep that night. Neither did Claire. At 3 a.m, while she pretended to be asleep, her phone vibrated on the bedside table. Once. Twice. Then a message appeared on the lock screen. He knows. Claire opened her eyes. She saw me looking at it. And for the first time in 7 years of marriage, my wife looked at me like I was the person she was most afraid of losing. and the person she was most afraid to trust. I didn't ask about the message immediately. That was the first decision I made that night that changed everything. Instead, I stood up, walked to the window, and stared at the rain sliding down the glass. Behind me, Claire whispered, "Ethan." I turned. "Who is he?" She looked at the phone. "I don't know." It was a terrible lie. Not because I had proof. Because I knew Claire. She was a terrible liar when she was afraid. She used to lie about little things to surprise me. Birthday presents, dinner reservations, trips she had secretly planned. But this was different. Her hands were trembling. I walked back to the chair. "Claire, I'm not going to yell at you." She said nothing. "I'm not going to threaten you." Still nothing. "I just need the truth." Her eyes filled with tears. "I can't." Those 3 words hurt more than any accusation could have. I looked down at my wedding ring. "How long?" "What? How long have you been hiding something from me?" She wiped her cheek. "It isn't what you think." "I don't know what to think." "I know." "Then help me." She turned toward the wall. "I need time." I wanted to tell her that I had given her 7 years. Instead, I said, "Okay." She looked surprised. I stood. "Get some rest." "Ethan, I'll be here." I left the room, but I didn't go home. I sat in a hospital cafeteria until sunrise, drinking coffee that tasted like burnt paper. And while I sat there, I remembered something Claire had said 3 weeks earlier. We had been eating dinner when she suddenly asked, "If you discovered something terrible about me, would you leave?" I had laughed. "What kind of terrible?" "I'm serious." I reached across the table and took her hand. "I want to understand first." She stared at our joined hands. "And if you couldn't understand? Then we'd figure it out together." She smiled sadly. "You always make things sound easy. I don't think marriage is supposed to be easy." She had squeezed my hand. "Promise me something." "What?" "Don't make decisions when you're angry." I had promised. Now, sitting alone in that hospital cafeteria, I realized she had not been asking a hypothetical question. She had been preparing me. Over the next 2 days, Claire recovered slowly. The police investigated the accident and determined that the van driver had been distracted and speeding. There was no evidence that anyone had intentionally caused the crash. That should have comforted me. It didn't, because Claire's fear remained, and someone was still texting her. She deleted every message. I saw her do it. I never confronted her. Instead, I became quiet. I stopped asking where she had been. Stopped asking who called. Stopped checking whether she was telling me the truth. For the first time in our marriage, I simply watched. And what I saw frightened me more than the accident. Claire had been meeting someone. I discovered that accidentally. On the 4th day, while helping her organize the bills, I found a receipt inside her coat. A private clinic, not a medical clinic. A legal consultation service. The date was 2 weeks before the accident. I stared at the receipt for a long time. Then I put it back exactly where I had found it. That evening, Claire asked, "Why are you so quiet?" "I'm tired. You've barely spoken to me. I thought you needed peace." She looked hurt. "You're angry." "No, you're lying." I almost smiled. "Maybe I learned from you." The words escaped before I could stop them. Claire went completely still. I regretted saying them immediately, but I didn't apologize. Not this time. She looked down. "I deserve that." "No," I said softly. "You deserve honesty." Her eyes met mine. "I've been trying to protect you." "From what?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. A nurse entered the room before she could answer. The moment passed. That night, I went home alone. Claire stayed at the hospital. Our apartment felt strangely unfamiliar. 7 years of marriage surrounded me. Her shoes by the door. Our wedding photograph above the bookshelf. The small ceramic cup she had bought on our first trip together. I picked up the photograph. We were smiling. I remember that day. I remember believing that loving someone meant standing beside them no matter what. But I was beginning to understand something painful. Sometimes love makes you stay. And sometimes love makes you afraid to admit that you have already been left behind. At 1:17 in the morning, my phone rang. It was Claire. I answered immediately. "Claire." Her voice was barely audible. "Ethan, what happened? You need to come back to the hospital. Are you okay?" "No." I stood. "What is it?" She breathed shakily. "The police found something in the wreck." My heart dropped. "What?" A second phone. I couldn't speak. Claire continued. "And they said it belonged to me." I stared into the darkness of our apartment. Claire, do you have a second phone? She was silent. Then she whispered, no. And before the call ended, I heard another voice in the background. A man's voice. Calm. Close. And he said, Ethan shouldn't be there. I drove back to the hospital faster than I should have. The rain had stopped, but the roads were still shining under the streetlights. Every red light felt like an insult. A second phone. A man's voice. And Claire saying she didn't know where it came from. None of it made sense. When I reached the hospital, I found 2 police officers outside Claire's room. One of them stepped forward. Mr. Hale? Yes. I'm Detective Marcus Bell. Where's my wife? She's inside. She's safe. Who was the man with her? The detective frowned. What man? I stared at him. I heard a man's voice when she called me. He exchanged a look with his partner. There was no man in the room when we arrived. Then somebody left. Perhaps. He opened the door. Claire was sitting upright. She looked exhausted. When she saw me, she began crying. Not dramatically, just silently. Tears rolling down her face as if she had run out of strength to hold them back. I walked toward her. Tell me everything. She looked at the detectives. Detective Bell nodded. Claire took a breath. The second phone was found underneath the driver's seat. You said you didn't know about it. I don't. Then whose is it? She shook her head. They don't know. The detective placed a clear evidence bag on the table. Inside was a cheap black phone. I stared at it. Did the police unlock it? Not yet. Then how do you know someone was using it? There are recent calls. To whom? The detective looked at Claire. That is why we're here. Claire lowered her eyes. The detective turned toward me. The last outgoing call from this phone was made 40 minutes before the accident. To who? You. The room became silent. I looked at Claire. She looked just as shocked as I was. That isn't possible. Detective Bell nodded. The number matches your phone. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. There was no missed call. No incoming call. Nothing. Maybe it's spoofed, I said. Possibly. Claire suddenly whispered, Ethan. I looked at her. I know that phone. My stomach tightened. You said you didn't. I didn't know where I'd seen it. Where? She stared at the black device. Your old workshop. I froze. My old workshop had been closed for almost 2 years. It was the place where I had spent my 20s designing small mechanical systems and prototypes before taking a full-time job with a manufacturing company. Claire had always hated that workshop, not because of the work, because of what it represented. I had once dreamed of building something of my own. She had encouraged me. Then, after we got married, money became tight. We had a mortgage. Her career was taking off. My father became sick, so I abandoned the idea. I told myself dreams could wait. Claire had told me, they don't have to disappear. Just wait until we're ready. But we never became ready. Or perhaps I stopped waiting. I looked at the phone. Why would this be in my workshop? Claire shook her head. I don't know. Detective Bell asked, did anyone else have access? I thought about it. One person. Who? I hesitated. Then I said the name. Daniel. Claire's face changed. Daniel Mercer was my former business partner. We had worked together before my marriage. He had been brilliant, ambitious, and impatient. He wanted everything immediately. I wanted to build carefully. That difference eventually destroyed our partnership. We hadn't spoken in 3 years. Detective Bell wrote his name down. Could he have access to your old workshop? No. I paused. Unless he still had a key. The detective looked up. Did he? I don't know. Claire suddenly grabbed my wrist. Ethan, don't go there. Why? I heard that voice before. Whose? Her eyes filled with fear. Daniel's. The name seemed to drain the air from the room. Detective Bell stood. We'll investigate it. But I barely heard him. I was thinking about the last 6 months. Claire had been distant. She had started coming home late. She had received calls she wouldn't take in front of me. And I had blamed work. I had blamed stress. I had blamed myself. Now I wondered whether the marriage I thought I understood had been hiding another story underneath it. The next morning, I went to my old workshop with Detective Bell. The building had been closed for months. Dust covered the windows. The lock on the side door had been replaced. But when the detective examined it, he found something disturbing. Someone had recently used the key. Inside, everything looked untouched, except my old workbench. A single folder sat in the center. My name was written on it. I opened it. Inside were technical drawings. My drawings. designs I had created almost 10 years earlier. But they weren't old copies. They had been updated, improved, developed. Someone had continued my work. At the bottom of the final page was a company logo, a company I had never heard of. Then I saw the signature, Daniel Mercer. I felt something inside me go cold. He hadn't stolen my old dream. He had been building it, using my work. And somehow Claire was involved. I didn't confront Claire that evening. I wanted to, more than anything. But something stopped me. The old version of me would have demanded answers immediately. The husband who had spent years believing that patience could fix anything would have sat beside her until she finally confessed. But I wasn't that man anymore. Not completely. I had begun to understand that there was a difference between patience and allowing someone to keep lying to you. So I waited. Claire was discharged from the hospital 3 days later. She moved slowly around our apartment. I carried her bags, prepared her meals, helped her take medication. I did everything a husband was supposed to do. But something between us had changed. She felt it too. One evening, she found me standing beside the bookshelf. "You haven't asked me about Daniel." "I know." "Why?" "Because I want you to tell me without being forced." She looked away. "I can't." "Then don't." She looked confused. I continued. "I spent 7 years believing that if I loved you enough, you'd eventually trust me with everything. Ethan, I was wrong." She started crying. "I was trying to protect you." "You keep saying that." "Because it's true." "Then tell me what you were protecting me from." She sat down. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she said quietly, "Daniel contacted me 8 months ago." I felt my chest tighten. "Why?" "He said he had something that belonged to you. Your designs." She nodded. "He told me you had abandoned them." "I had." "He said you shouldn't have." I stared at her. "What did you do?" "I met him." "How many times?" She didn't answer. "Claire." 7. 7. The number hurt more than I expected. 7 times. "Yes." "Did you sleep with him?" Her face collapsed. "No." I believed her. At least about that. But trust was already breaking apart. "Then what happened?" "He showed me what he had built." She wiped her tears. "He had turned your old prototype into something real." I remember the prototype. A compact energy management system designed for factories. I had spent 3 years working on it. I had abandoned it because I couldn't afford development. Daniel had found a way. "He wanted your help," Claire said. "Why?" "Because some of the original design required your calculations." I laughed bitterly. "So you helped him steal my work?" "No." "Then what did you do?" "I tried to get it back." "That stopped me." "What?" Claire looked at me. Daniel wasn't building the company alone. Investors were involved. He had already presented the technology as his own. "And you knew?" "Yes." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because he threatened you." My anger faltered. "What kind of threat?" "He said if I went to you, he'd accuse you of intellectual property theft." I stared at her. "What?" "He had altered some of the files." My hands went cold. "He wanted to make it look like you stole his work." Claire continued. "I thought I could fix it quietly." "You thought you could fix my life without telling me." I was scared. "So you lied?" "Yes." "You met him behind my back?" "Yes." "You hid the legal meetings?" "Yes." "And when I asked whether something was wrong, you told me nothing." She nodded. "I know." I sat down. For the first time, the anger disappeared. What remained was exhaustion. "Why did you keep going?" She covered her face. "Because every time I tried to stop, it got worse." "What happened the night of the accident?" "I was going to meet Daniel." I looked up. "Why?" "He had agreed to give me the original files." "Did he?" "No." "What happened?" "He told me you already knew." "I didn't." "I know that now." She began crying again. "He said if I didn't cooperate, he'd destroy your reputation." "Cooperate with what?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Selling the technology." My stomach turned. "You were going to sell my invention?" "No. I was going to get the money back to you." "Claire, that's not how this works." "I know." "No, you don't." She looked at me. "You made decisions about my work, my career, and my future without me. I was trying to save you. You were deciding for me." Silence. Then Claire said something that I would remember for the rest of my life. "I thought you would forgive me because you always did." I stared at her, and suddenly I understood. The problem wasn't that Claire believed I was weak. The problem was that I had trained everyone around me to believe I would never leave. Every time she hurt me, I forgave her. Every time she crossed a boundary, I moved it. Every time I was disappointed, I told myself marriage required sacrifice. I had mistaken endurance for love. I stood. Claire reached for my hand. "Where are you going?" "I need air." "Ethan, please." I stopped at the door. She whispered, "Are you leaving me?" I looked back at the woman I had once believed I would grow old beside. "I don't know." That was the first honest answer I had given her in months. The next morning, I received an email from a lawyer. The subject line contained only 4 words. "Your invention is yours." Attached were documents proving that Daniel had altered the original filing dates and used my abandoned research without authorization. But there was something else. A second attachment. A signed agreement between Daniel and Claire. I opened it. My hands began to shake. Claire had not received money. She had agreed to transfer ownership of my technology to Daniel's company temporarily. And the agreement had one condition. If she failed to convince me to sign the final transfer, Daniel would release evidence designed to ruin my career. I read the document twice, then a third time. At the bottom was Claire's signature. The woman I loved had been trying to protect me. But in doing so, she had placed my entire future in someone else's hands. And that was the moment I stopped asking whether Claire had betrayed me. I started asking myself a much harder question. Could I ever trust her again? That night, I packed one suitcase. Claire watched from the bedroom doorway. "You're really going?" I nodded. "For how long?" "I don't know." "Will you come back?" I looked at her. 7 years of memories stood between us. Our wedding. Our first apartment. Her mother's funeral. My father's hospital room. Every promise. Every forgiveness. Every lie. "I don't know," I said again. Then I walked out. For the first time since our wedding day, I wasn't walking away because I was angry. I was walking away because I had finally become tired of abandoning myself. I didn't tell Claire where I was going. Not because I wanted to punish her. Because for the first time, I needed a place where nobody could make decisions for me. I drove 3 hours north to a small town where my uncle had once owned a machine shop. The shop had been closed for years, but the building was still standing. I had spent part of my childhood there. Whenever school was out, my uncle would let me sit beside him while he repaired old equipment. He used to say, "Machines tell you what's wrong if you stop shouting at them." I hadn't understood what he meant when I was 12. I understood now. People were different. They could hide things. Machines couldn't. I rented a small room above a bakery and spent the first week doing almost nothing. I slept, walked, ate cheap food, and stared at the ceiling. Claire called 17 times. I answered none. On the 8th day, she sent one message. "I want to ask you to forgive me. I just want you to know that I'm sorry." I read it, then put the phone down. I wasn't ready to answer. The lawyer who had contacted me, Rachel Lynn, called the next morning. "I reviewed the files," she said, "and your original designs are clearly documented. What about Daniel? He has a problem." "What kind?" "He used your work to obtain investment funding." I sat up. "How much?" "Several million." I felt dizzy. And Claire's agreement? Probably unenforceable. Probably because she wasn't the owner. I closed my eyes. "So what happens now?" "That depends on you." I laughed softly. For once, everyone keeps telling me that. Rachel became serious. "You have a choice. You can fight Daniel, reclaim the technology, and build the company you abandoned. And the other choice? Walk away." I looked around the tiny room. For years, I had dreamed about that technology. But every time life became difficult, I told myself it wasn't practical. Then I thought about Claire, about Daniel, about the accident, about the phone hidden beneath the seat. I suddenly realized something. My life had been controlled by fear for years. Fear of failure, fear of disappointing Claire, fear of losing stability, fear of becoming the kind of man who chose his dream over his family. And now my family was the reason I had lost the dream. I told Rachel, "I want the files. Then we'll fight." It wasn't easy. The first few months were brutal. Daniel's company had lawyers, investors, public relations teams. I had one lawyer and an old laptop. I also had the original designs. But that wasn't enough. I had to prove that the technology was mine. So I went back through everything. Old notebooks, emails, hard drives, bank records, workshop photographs. I spent 16-hour days reconstructing a decade of my life. And somewhere in that process, I found something unexpected. A notebook from my 20s. Inside the cover, my younger self had written, "Build something that helps people, not something that makes people admire you." I stared at those words for a long time. I had forgotten who I wanted to become. I only remembered who everyone expected me to be. That notebook became my compass. I rebuilt the prototype. Not the way Daniel had. My way. Smaller. Cheaper. More efficient. I hired 2 engineers from the local technical college. One of them was a quiet woman named Maya Patel. She was 29, brilliant, and completely unimpressed by my history. During our first meeting, she looked at my prototype and said, "This is good. Good. Good enough to make me angry." I smiled. "Why?" "Because you wasted 10 years. I laughed for the first time in months. "You're hired." Maya became more than an employee. She became my friend. She challenged every assumption I made. Whenever I worked too late, she would shut my laptop. "Go home. This is my company." Exactly. If the owner collapses, the company dies. Slowly, the business grew. We called it Northline Systems. Our first product wasn't glamorous. It was a compact energy control unit for small factories. But it worked, and customers noticed. 6 months later, we received our first major contract. Then another. Then 5 more. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't building something because I was trying to prove myself to someone. I was building because I loved the work. And that changed me. I became more confident. Not louder. Not arrogant. Just certain. I learned to say no. I learned to negotiate. I learned that boundaries weren't punishments. They were instructions for how people were allowed to treat you. Meanwhile, Claire remained in our apartment. She didn't move out. She didn't sell anything. She simply waited. At least that's what I heard from mutual friends. She had returned to work, but rarely stayed late. She stopped attending social events. She didn't defend herself when people asked about me. And Daniel? He started losing investors. Rachel had uncovered too much. The evidence showed he had manipulated documents. But there was one thing neither of us knew. Someone had helped him. Someone who had access to my old files. Someone who had been present during the months before the accident. That person was revealed when one of Daniel's former employees contacted Rachel. His name was Victor Hale, my older brother. I read the email 3 times. My brother, the man who had given a speech at my wedding. The man who had told me he was proud of me. The man who had encouraged me to abandon my invention because marriage comes before ambition. I called Rachel. "Are you sure?" "Yes." "What did Victor do?" "He provided Daniel with your old files." I couldn't breathe. Then she added, "He also told Daniel that Claire would never tell you the truth." I closed my eyes. Suddenly, the entire story looked different. And for the first time, I wondered whether Claire had really been the only person keeping secrets from me. I called my brother. He answered on the second ring. "Ethan." His voice sounded normal, almost warm. "How are you?" I didn't answer. "Ethan, why did you give Daniel my files?" Silence. It lasted long enough to tell me everything. Finally, Victor said, "Where did you hear that?" "That's your answer?" "Listen to me." "No." "Ethan, you don't understand." "Then explain." He sighed. "I thought I was helping." "With what?" "With your future." I laughed bitterly. "My future?" "You were throwing away your talent. So you gave my work to another man." "He had resources. I had the work. You had a wife." That sentence stopped me. "What does that mean?" "You were never going to build that company." "You don't know that." "I knew you." I stared at the wall. "You knew the version of me who kept giving up." Victor became quiet. Then he said, "Claire asked me for help." My chest tightened. "When?" "Months before the accident." "What did she ask?" "She wanted to understand what Daniel was doing." "So she knew you were involved?" "She knew I had spoken to him." "Did you tell her you gave him my files?" "No." I closed my eyes. Everyone had been protecting everyone else. Except me. "Why did you do it?" Victor's voice became softer. "Because I thought Daniel could turn your invention into something real. You could have asked me. You would have refused. You don't know that. I knew you were afraid." That hurt because it was true. But truth doesn't make betrayal acceptable. "I was afraid," I said. "You were supposed to be my brother." "I am." "No. You were supposed to believe in me when I didn't believe in myself." He didn't answer. I ended the call. For the next few weeks, I stopped thinking about my family. I focused on Northline. We won the legal case against Daniel. He was forced to surrender the disputed technology and return investment funds obtained through false claims. His company collapsed. There was no dramatic courtroom victory, no cheering crowd, just paperwork, a settlement, a business quietly disappearing. That was enough. I didn't want Daniel ruined. I wanted my life back. Then Northline received an unexpected offer. A major industrial company wanted to acquire 30% of our company. The amount was more money than I had ever seen in my life. Maya wanted me to accept. I didn't. Why, she asked. Because I don't want to wake up 5 years from now and realize I sold another part of myself because someone told me it was practical. She smiled. That's the smartest thing you've ever said. We expanded instead. Within a year, Northline employed 47 people. Within 2, we had customers in 3 countries. And one morning, I walked into our new headquarters and saw my name on the glass wall. Not because I had asked for it, because my team had put it there. I stood there silently. Maya came beside me. You okay? I nodded. I just never imagined this. Neither did the man who walked into that bakery 2 years ago looking like he had lost everything. I smiled. I did lose everything. No. She looked at me. You lost people who convinced you that losing yourself was normal. I didn't know what to say. Maya had become important to me. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. It happened slowly. Coffee after late meetings. Long conversations about books. Arguments about business. Walks after work. She never asked about Claire unless I brought her up. She never tried to replace anyone. She simply treated me like a person whose past didn't determine his worth. One evening, she asked, "Do you still love your wife?" I was quiet. Yes. She nodded. That doesn't mean you have to go back. I know. Do you want to? I looked at the city outside the window. I don't know. Maya smiled. Then don't decide tonight. That became her gift to me. She never forced me to choose. Meanwhile, Claire's life had changed too. She resigned from her position. She sold the apartment. She moved into a smaller place. She had spent months helping Rachel provide evidence against Daniel. And she had done something I didn't expect. She turned down a settlement. The money would have been substantial. Instead, she gave a written statement admitting that she had concealed the technology transfer agreement from me. It damaged her reputation, but also helped prove that Daniel had manipulated her. She finally stopped trying to protect herself. For the first time, she told the truth even when the truth cost her something. One afternoon, I received a letter from her. It wasn't an apology. Not exactly. She wrote, "I used to think loving you meant preventing you from getting hurt. I understand now that I was really preventing you from making your own choices. I confused control with protection." I read it twice, then folded it. I didn't answer. Not yet. A month later, Northline held its first major product launch. Hundreds of people attended. Journalists, investors, engineers, customers. And at the back of the room, unnoticed by almost everyone, stood Claire. I saw her immediately. She wasn't wearing anything expensive. She wasn't trying to attract attention. She simply stood there, watching me speak about the invention she had once tried to save in the wrong way. When our eyes met, she smiled. There was sadness in it, but no expectation. After the presentation, she waited outside. I walked toward her. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Then she said, "You built it." I nodded. "You really built it?" "Yes." She looked at the building, then back at me. "I'm proud of you." And somehow, those 4 words hurt more than anger ever could. Because years ago, I had desperately wanted to hear them. Now I no longer needed them. Claire took a breath. "Can we talk?" I looked at her. "Not tonight." She nodded. "Okay." She turned to leave, then stopped. "Ethan." "Yes." "I finally understand what I lost." I said nothing. She smiled sadly. "I know that doesn't mean you'll come back." "No." "I know." She walked away. And for the first time, I realized something had changed inside me. I wasn't waiting for Claire to regret losing me. I wasn't waiting for an apology. I wasn't even waiting to stop loving her. I was simply building a life in which her absence no longer decided whether I was happy. And that was the beginning of my freedom. Claire didn't contact me for 3 months after the product launch. I thought that would make things easier. It didn't. Some wounds don't disappear when the person who caused them stops touching them. They simply become quieter. Northline was growing quickly. We opened a second office. Maya became our operations director. I spent most days traveling between factories, meeting clients, testing equipment, and solving problems. My life was full. For the first time in years, I woke up with something to look forward to. But sometimes, usually late at night, I would remember Claire. Not the woman from the hospital. Not the woman who had lied. I remembered the girl who had laughed when we got lost on our first date. The woman who had sat beside my father's hospital bed. The wife who had once fallen asleep on my shoulder while we planned a future neither of us could afford. Memories are cruel that way. They don't ask whether someone deserves to be remembered. They simply return. One evening, I was leaving the office when Maya caught up with me. Dinner. I have work. You always have work. I own the company. You also own a stomach. I laughed. Fine. We went to a small restaurant near the office. Nothing fancy. Halfway through dinner, Maya asked, "Have you heard from Claire?" I shook my head. "Do you miss her?" I thought about it. Yes. Maya nodded. "That's okay." "Is it?" "Of course." I thought moving on meant not missing someone. "No." She put down her fork. "Moving on means missing them without wanting your old life back." Her words stayed with me. When we left the restaurant, I realized something. I was beginning to fall in love with her. Not because she was different from Claire, because she was herself. There was no comparison, no competition, no attempt to heal me. She simply made ordinary days feel peaceful. And after years of emotional storms, peace felt almost frightening. I didn't act on it. Not yet. I wanted to be certain I wasn't using Maya to escape my past. So I waited. Then the past came looking for me. It happened on a Monday morning. Rachel called. "Ethan, I need you to sit down." I smiled. That usually means something terrible. This time, maybe not. She told me Claire had discovered something. Something about the accident. My smile disappeared. What? The police reopened the case. Why? Because of new evidence. I stood. What evidence? The second phone. I felt the old chill return. What about it? Someone finally extracted the deleted data. I waited. Rachel said there were voice recordings. My heart began pounding. What kind? One was recorded inside your old workshop. And there were 3 people. I already knew 2 of them. Daniel. Victor. The third voice was Claire's. I closed my eyes. What were they saying? Rachel hesitated. Daniel was angry. He accused Claire of taking the original files. Why? Because she had secretly copied evidence of his fraud. That surprised me. She was trying to expose him? Yes. Then why didn't she tell me? Because she was still afraid. I remember the hospital. Her fear. Her silence. Her insistence that she was protecting me. Rachel continued. The recording was made 2 days before the accident. What happened? Daniel told Claire that if she went to the police, he would make it look like you had stolen the technology. That part one knew. No. Her voice changed. There was something else. What? Daniel knew about the accident before it happened. My body went completely still. What did you say? He mentioned the crash. Before. Yes. How long before? 2 days. I gripped the edge of the desk. Then the accident wasn't random. We don't know that yet. Rachel, we need evidence. I couldn't speak. For months, I had believed the wreck was simply a terrible coincidence. A distracted driver. Bad weather. Wrong place. Wrong time. Now the possibility of something darker had entered my mind. Rachel sent me the recording. I listened alone. Daniel's voice came first. You think you can threaten me? Claire answered, I'm not threatening you. You're going to him. I have to. You don't. He deserves the truth. He deserves to stay out of this. Claire's voice trembled. I already lied to him. Daniel laughed. You've lied to him for months. I'm done. Then came Victor's voice. Daniel, leave her alone. Daniel said, you should be thanking me. For what? For making sure your brother never finds out what you did. There was silence. Then Victor said something I could barely hear. What happens if she tells him? Daniel answered calmly. Then Ethan has a very bad week. The recording ended. I sat in silence. My brother had been there. Claire had been there. Daniel had been there. And someone had known the accident might happen. I called Detective Bell. He arrived at my office that afternoon. We listened to the recording together. When it ended, he said, "This changes things. Can you prove Daniel caused the crash?" "Not yet." "What about the driver?" "He still claims he ran the light accidentally." "And if Daniel arranged it, then we need a connection." I thought about the voice Claire had heard after the crash. She wasn't supposed to be driving tonight. I asked, "Could that have been Daniel?" Detective Bell nodded slowly. "It's possible." "What about Victor?" "We'll investigate." I felt sick. My brother, my wife, the man who had tried to steal my work. All three had been connected, but only one of them had been sitting beside me at our wedding. Only one had promised to stand beside me forever. And that was the person I still couldn't fully understand. Claire. That evening, I called her. She answered immediately. "Ethan, where are you?" She gave me an address. I drove there. When I arrived, she was standing outside a small house. She looked thinner, tired, but strangely calmer than before. "You know," she said. "Yes." She lowered her head. "I was hoping you'd never find out." "About the accident?" Her eyes filled with tears. "About everything." I stepped closer. "Claire, tell me the truth." She nodded. "I will." But before she could continue, a black car stopped across the street. Claire's face went pale. She whispered, "He found us." I turned toward the car. A man stepped out. Not Daniel. Victor, my brother, closed the car door and stared at us from across the street. Claire grabbed my arm. "Don't go to him." "Why?" "Because you don't know what he's capable of anymore." Victor began walking toward us. I stayed where I was. "Ethan," he called. His voice sounded exhausted. "I need to explain." I looked at Claire, then back at him. "You've had years to explain." He stopped. "You're right. Did you know about the accident?" Victor's face changed. "No." Claire whispered, "He's lying." Victor looked at her. "I didn't know." "You knew Daniel was threatening him." "I knew he was dangerous." "You still gave him the files." Victor looked down. "I thought I could control the situation." I laughed. "That's what everyone keeps saying." He took another step. "I made a terrible mistake." "You made several." "I know." "Did you know Daniel planned to meet Claire that night?" "Yes." My stomach tightened. "Why?" "I thought they were going to settle things." "They weren't." "I know that now." "Did you know he was going to hurt her?" "No." Claire stepped forward. "You knew he had threatened Ethan?" Victor nodded. "I thought the threat was financial." "What does that mean?" "I didn't know he would involve a driver." Silence. I stared at him. "Then you knew something was planned?" Victor closed his eyes. "I suspected." That answer broke something inside me. "You suspected?" "I was afraid." "You were afraid?" "Yes." "While my wife was driving into a situation you suspected was dangerous." He had no answer. I felt my anger rising. But I didn't shout. I didn't need to. "Tell me everything." Victor finally did. Daniel had paid the delivery driver to cause a controlled collision. The plan wasn't to kill Claire. It was to frighten her. Daniel wanted the documents she had collected. He believed the crash would force her to surrender them. But the driver panicked. The weather was worse than expected. The impact was far more violent. Victor had learned about the plan afterward. He hadn't caused the crash, but he had known enough to stop it. And he hadn't. That was his crime. Not murder. Not sabotage. Cowardice. He had chosen silence because speaking up would expose his own involvement. I asked him one final question. "Why did you think protecting me meant letting me live inside a lie?" He looked at me. "I thought if you knew everything, you'd lose your marriage and your career." I smiled sadly. "I lost both because you kept me in the dark." Victor began crying. I had never seen my brother cry before, but I didn't comfort him. Not because I hated him, because I couldn't carry his guilt for him. The police arrested Daniel 2 weeks later. The driver agreed to testify in exchange for a reduced sentence. Victor cooperated with the investigation. He admitted giving Daniel my files and concealing evidence. He lost his job. He faced legal consequences. Claire wasn't charged with a crime because she had ultimately helped investigators and had been acting under threats. But she still had to live with what she had done. So did I. After Victor left that night, Claire and I sat on the porch. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Finally, she said, "I should have told you." "Yes. I thought I was protecting you." "I know. I thought if I could fix everything before you knew, we'd go back to normal." "There was never going to be a normal after that." "I know." She looked at her hands. "I loved you." "I know. Do you still love me?" The question stayed between us. I could have lied. Instead, I answered honestly. Yes. She closed her eyes. A tear ran down her cheek. But I don't know if I can be your husband again. She nodded slowly. I understand. I don't think love is the problem. What is? Trust. She looked at me. I broke it. We both did. She frowned. How did you? I kept forgiving things I should have confronted. She shook her head. You didn't cause this. No. I looked toward the road. But I helped create the marriage where both of us thought silence was easier than truth. Claire cried quietly. I didn't touch her. Not because I didn't care. Because sometimes touching someone creates promises you aren't ready to make. After a while, she whispered, Is there someone else? I thought of Maya. Yes. Claire closed her eyes. I wondered. She didn't know me when I was broken. That matters. She knows me now. Claire smiled through her tears. Then don't hurt her. I looked at her. I won't. She nodded. Then she said something I never expected. You should go. Are you sure? Yes. She looked at me. I spent so long trying to keep you from leaving. A small smile appeared. I think loving you now means letting you. I stood. Claire stood too. For a moment, we faced each other. 7 years. 1 marriage. 1,000 memories. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out my old wedding ring box. I stared at it. You kept that. I found it when I moved. She handed it to me. Inside was a photograph from our wedding day. We were laughing. Young. Certain. Naive. I took the photograph. Claire said, I don't want you to remember me as the worst thing I ever did. I looked at her. I won't. What will you remember? I thought about it. The woman who once got lost with me on our first date. She laughed softly through her tears. That was a long time ago. Not to me. We hugged. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't reconciliation. It was goodbye. A real goodbye. And when I walked back to my car, I cried. Not because I wanted her back. Because I finally understood that sometimes two people can love each other sincerely and still become wrong for each other's future. I drove away. For the first time, I wasn't running from Claire. I was moving toward myself. And when I reached home, Maya was waiting outside. She looked at me. You okay? I nodded. No. She smiled gently. Good answer. I laughed. Then she stepped closer. Do you want to talk? I looked at her. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of what might happen next. Yes, I said. I do. I didn't kiss Maya that night. She didn't expect me to. We sat on the steps outside my house until midnight, talking about everything except Claire. For the first time in months, I felt no pressure to make a decision. Maya didn't ask whether I was ready for another relationship. She asked whether I was ready to stop punishing myself for the one that had ended. I didn't know how to answer. I don't think I know how to trust my own judgment anymore, I admitted. She looked at me. Then don't make a lifelong decision tonight. What should I do? Tomorrow. I laughed. That's simple. Most things aren't. She stood. Good night, Ethan. Good night. She walked away. I watched until she disappeared around the corner. And for the first time since the accident, I slept without waking up in the middle of the night. The next year changed everything. Northline expanded into Europe. We developed a second product. Our team grew to more than 100 employees. I was invited to conferences. Investors approached us. Business magazines wanted interviews. People began calling me successful. But success didn't feel like what I had imagined. It wasn't a trophy. It was responsibility. People depended on me. Families depended on the company. And every morning, I remembered the version of myself who had once been too afraid to pursue his own dream. I made one promise to that man. Never again. Maya eventually became my partner in more ways than business. We took things slowly. Our first real date happened almost 6 months after Claire and I separated. Maya chose the restaurant. I chose the dessert. She hated my choice. You ordered chocolate cake without asking me. You said you trusted me. I trusted your judgment in engineering. That's insulting. She laughed. It was an ordinary evening. And ordinary was exactly what I needed. There were no dramatic declarations. No promises about forever. Just two people learning each other. She knew my history. She knew I had been married. She knew Claire would always be part of my past. She never asked me to erase that. Instead, she helped me understand something important. A new relationship shouldn't require you to destroy the memory of an old one. It should give you a reason to stop living inside it, 2 years after the accident, I received a letter from Victor. He had completed his legal obligations. He had lost almost everything financially, but he had also begun working at a nonprofit that helped small businesses protect intellectual property. The irony wasn't lost on me. His letter said, I spent years believing success meant being useful to powerful people. I was wrong. I should have been useful to my family first. He didn't ask for forgiveness. That mattered. I replied, not warmly, not coldly, just honestly. I don't know if we'll ever have the relationship we had before, but I don't hate you. I hope you build something honest. It was enough. Claire also rebuilt her life. She started working with a legal advocacy group that helped victims of financial coercion. She didn't become famous. She didn't seek sympathy. She simply worked. Sometimes people asked me whether I hated her. I never did. I hated what happened. I hated the lies. I hated the fear. I hated the version of our marriage where both of us kept believing that silence was love. But I didn't hate her. That distinction took me years to understand. Then one evening, Claire called. Her voice was calm. Can I see you? I agreed. We met at a quiet cafe. She looked different. Not physically. Something in her expression had changed. She seemed lighter. I heard Northline is opening another facility, she said. It is. Congratulations. Thank you. She smiled. I wanted to tell you something before I leave the city. Where are you going? Seattle. Work? Yes. That's good. She looked down at her coffee. I've been thinking about our marriage. I waited. I used to believe you left because you stopped loving me. I didn't. I know that now. She looked up. You left because you finally loved yourself enough to stop accepting what was hurting you. I didn't answer. She continued. I used to think that made me the villain. You made serious mistakes. I know, but you're not only your mistakes. She smiled faintly. Neither are you. We sat quietly. Then she asked, Are you happy? I looked through the window. Maya was waiting for me outside. She had promised to pick me up. Yes, I said. Claire followed my gaze. She's good for you. She is. I can tell. Claire smiled. I hope you marry her someday. I looked at her. Claire. No, let me finish. She took a breath. I spent years believing marriage meant holding on to someone no matter what. She shook her head. Now, I think marriage means choosing each other freely, every day. I nodded. That's closer to the truth. She smiled. I hope she never has to wonder whether you trust her. I won't make her wonder. Claire stood. I should go. I stood too. She hugged me. This time it felt different. There was no unfinished business in it. No secret hope. Just gratitude for what had once been good. When she stepped back, she said, Take care of yourself. You too. She walked away. I watched her disappear through the glass doors. And surprisingly, I felt peaceful. Not triumphant. Not victorious. Peaceful. That night, Maya and I walked along the river. She held my hand. Did you get closure? I smiled. I think closure is overrated. She laughed. What do you mean? I don't think the past closes like a door. Then what happens? You just stop living there. She squeezed my hand. I like that. We walked in silence. Then Maya stopped. Ethan, yes. There's something I want to ask you. My heart started beating faster. She reached into her coat pocket. For one terrifying second, I thought she was about to propose. Instead, she pulled out a small key. What is that? The key to the new research lab. She placed it in my hand. You're giving me a key? No. She smiled. I'm giving you access. I laughed. That sounds less romantic. Good. She leaned closer. I don't want to own your future. I looked at her. I want to build it with you. That sentence stayed with me because it was the exact opposite of everything that had destroyed my marriage. No control. No sacrifice disguised as love. No decisions made behind my back. Just choice. Together. I kissed her. It was gentle, simple, and for once, I wasn't afraid of what love might cost me. I knew what love was supposed to feel like now. Not a cage. Not a debt. A choice. 6 months later, I proposed to Maya. I didn't make a grand public announcement. I didn't rent a stadium. I didn't hire musicians. I took her back to the street where she and I had first met for coffee years earlier. It was raining. She laughed. Of course it's raining. You said you liked rain. I said that before you proposed. I pulled the ring from my pocket. Then you have 5 seconds to change your mind. She stared at me. Ethan, yes. You really learned how to negotiate. I smiled. She hugged me before I could finish. Yes. We married the following spring. The ceremony was small. Our closest friends, Maya's parents, my mother. My brother wasn't there. He sent a letter. I kept it. Claire sent a card. There was no bitterness in it. Only one sentence. May you both choose each other, even on the difficult days. I placed the card inside a drawer. Not because I wanted to hide it, because some things belong in the past without being thrown away. After the wedding, Maya and I built a house outside the city. Nothing extravagant. A garden. A workshop. A large kitchen because Maya loved cooking and I loved eating. Our life was surprisingly ordinary, and I had never been happier. But one morning, almost 4 years after the accident, I received a call from the hospital. Not about Claire. About me. I had been experiencing chest pain for weeks, but ignored it. Maya insisted I get checked. The doctor told me it was stress. Nothing serious. But lying in that hospital bed, I suddenly understood something. The accident had changed more than my marriage. It had changed my relationship with time. I had spent years assuming there would always be another day to say something. Another chance to apologize. Another opportunity to pursue a dream. Another year to become who I wanted to be. There might not be. So I started living differently. I took weekends off. I traveled with Maya. I visited my mother more often. I called old friends. I spent time in the workshop without checking my phone. I learned that success wasn't how many people knew your name. It was how much of your life actually belonged to you. Northline continued growing. Eventually, we became one of the leading companies in our field. But I refused to become the man I had once feared. I remembered what happened when ambition became something other people used to control me. So I created a company culture where engineers could leave meetings and go home, where people could disagree with executives, where nobody was expected to sacrifice family for the company. Maya teased me about it. You're trying to build the company you wish you'd worked for. Maybe. Good. Years later, I visited my old workshop. The place had been restored. We turned it into a small innovation center for young engineers who couldn't afford equipment. On the wall, I hung the notebook from my 20s, the one with the sentence, "Build something that helps people, not something that makes people admire you." A young engineer once asked me, "Is that your philosophy?" I smiled. It took me 20 years to understand it. He laughed. Was it worth it? I looked around the workshop, at the young people building prototypes, at Maya standing across the room, at the life I had nearly lost because I was too afraid to leave the life that was hurting me. Yes, I said, it was. Sometimes people ask me what happened to Claire. She moved to Seattle. She built a quiet life. She never remarried, as far as I know, but she became successful in her own way. She now works with organizations that help people trapped in financial and emotional manipulation. Victor eventually rebuilt his career. He never became my best friend again, but once a year, he visits my mother. We speak occasionally. Our relationship will never return to what it was, and that's okay. Not every broken relationship needs to be restored. Some simply need to stop causing pain. Daniel served his sentence. His company disappeared. His name became a warning in legal circles. I never celebrated that. Consequences aren't revenge. They're simply what happens when choices finally catch up with someone. As for Claire and me, we became strangers who once knew each other better than anyone. There is sadness in that, but there is also peace. I don't hate her. I don't wish her pain. I don't want her back. And I don't need her to regret losing me. Because the greatest thing that happened after she left wasn't that she realized my value. It was that I finally realized it myself. The car wreck nearly took Claire's life, but the truth she heard afterward changed mine. For years, I thought the accident was the moment my marriage broke. It wasn't. The marriage had been breaking quietly for a long time. The accident simply forced us to stop pretending. Claire's betrayal taught me that love without honesty becomes fear. My own silence taught me that forgiveness without boundaries becomes self-abandonment. And leaving taught me that walking away isn't always giving up. Sometimes it's the first honest thing you do for yourself. Years later, I still remember that hospital room. The pale lights, the machines, Claire whispering that she had her voice. I remember how terrified I was. I remember thinking I couldn't survive losing her. I was wrong. I survived. Then I rebuilt. Not because I stopped caring, because I finally understood that my life couldn't remain centered around someone else's choices. Maya once asked me whether I regretted my first marriage. I thought about it for a long time. No, I said. Why? Because I loved her. She smiled. And because of everything that happened, I learned how to love differently. She rested her head against my shoulder. What did you learn? I kissed her forehead. That love isn't staying at any cost. She looked at me. Then what is it? I smiled. Choosing each other when neither person has to. She nodded. Outside, rain began tapping against the windows. For a moment, I remembered the night of the accident. The fear, the secrets, the hospital, the broken trust. But the memory no longer controlled me. It was simply a chapter, a painful chapter, an important chapter, but only a chapter. I closed a notebook on my desk. Maya reached for my hand, and I took it, not because I was afraid she might leave, not because I needed someone to complete me, because I was finally living a life I had chosen, a life filled with work I loved, people I trusted, a woman who stood beside me without trying to control me, and a future that didn't require anyone from my past to approve of it. That was the real ending. Not revenge, not regret, not watching the people who hurt me suffer. Just waking up one morning and realizing that I no longer needed them to understand what they had lost. I had already found what I needed. Myself, my purpose, my peace, and a life that finally felt like mine. 5 years after the accident, I received a package with no return address. It arrived at Northline on a Tuesday morning. Maya brought it into my office. Someone sent you this. I looked at the box. Ooh, no idea. The handwriting on the label was familiar. Claire. My stomach tightened. I opened it carefully. Inside was a small recording device, an old photograph, and a handwritten letter. I read the letter first. Ethan, I almost threw this away several times. I kept it because I thought one day you might want to know the truth without anger standing between us. The recording is from the night before the accident. I found it after everything was over. I couldn't bring myself to give it to you then. I'm giving it to you now because I finally understand that protecting someone from the truth is another form of taking away their choice. You don't owe me a response. Claire. I stared at the recording device. Maya stood quietly near the door. Do you want me to leave? I nodded. She closed the door. I pressed play. Static filled the room. Then Claire's voice. You said Ethan would never know. Daniel answered. He won't. You promised. I promised he wouldn't know before the transfer. And afterward, a pause. Afterward, he'll have no choice. Claire sounded frightened. You said this was temporary. It is. You're lying. I don't have time for your conscience. Then another voice entered. Victor. Daniel, this has gone too far. Daniel laughed. You're worried now? I never agreed to hurt Ethan. No. You agreed to give me his work. I thought you were helping him. You thought wrong. There was a long silence. Then Claire spoke. I have the original files. Daniel's voice became cold. Give them to me. No. Then Ethan gets destroyed. I won't let you. You don't have a choice. Claire whispered. There is always a choice. The recording ended. I sat there for a long time. Not because the recording revealed something new. Because it confirmed something I had spent years trying not to think about. Claire had known the danger. She had tried to stop it. But she had also kept me in the dark until it was too late. Both things were true. That was the hardest part of adulthood I had learned. People could love you and still hurt you. They could be afraid for you and still make terrible decisions. They could regret what they did and still be unable to undo it. There wasn't always one villain and one innocent person. Sometimes there were simply frightened people making choices they couldn't take back. Maya came in after an hour. She didn't ask what the recording said. She simply sat beside me. Are you okay? I nodded. I'm not angry. She smiled. That sounds like progress. I think I finally understand Claire. Does understanding change anything? No. I looked at the photograph. It was from our wedding. Claire and I were standing beneath an arch of white flowers. We looked impossibly happy. I can understand why she did what she did. Maya waited, and still no, I couldn't live that life again. She nodded. That's the difference between understanding and returning. I looked at her. How did I get so lucky? You didn't. I raised an eyebrow. You worked for it. I laughed. That sounds like something you'd say. Because it's true. She took my hand. You didn't get lucky when your marriage ended. You made choices afterward. I squeezed her fingers. That evening, I called Claire. She answered immediately. Ethan, I got the package. I know. You could have sent this years ago. I know. Why didn't you? I was ashamed. I closed my eyes. Were you afraid I'd hate you? Yes. I never hated you. I know that now. We sat in silence over the phone. Then I said, thank you. She began crying. For what? For telling the truth. You don't have to thank me. I know. Another silence. Then she asked, are you happy? I smiled. Yes. Really? Really? Good. I heard her breathe shakily. I always wondered whether leaving me ruined your life. It didn't. Did I ruin part of it? I thought about that. You changed it. That's not the same answer. No. I looked out the window. You changed it in a way I didn't understand at the time. And now I think some lives have to break before you stop living them for other people. She was quiet. Then she said, I'm glad you found your way. So am I. We said goodbye. This time there was no pain in it. Only gratitude. When I hung up, Maya was standing in the doorway. She smiled. You okay? I nodded. Yeah. Really? I smiled. Really? She walked over and hugged me. I held her, and I realized something. The final piece of my old life had just been returned to me. Not my marriage. Not my old dream. Something more important. The truth. And once you have the truth, you don't have to keep rewriting the past to make it easier to live with. You can simply accept it. Then move forward. A few months later, Northline opened the doors of its first public innovation center. We named it after my uncle. He had been the first person who taught me that building things wasn't about impressing people. It was about solving problems. Young engineers walked through the doors carrying sketches, laptops, and dreams that reminded me painfully of myself. One teenager showed me a prototype made from recycled components. It probably won't work, he said. I smiled. Build it anyway, even if it fails, especially if it fails. He looked confused. I laughed. Failure is information. Maya stood beside me. She whispered, you sound like an old man. I'm an old man. You're 43. Ancient. She rolled her eyes. We spent the afternoon talking to students. Some wanted advice about careers. Others wanted funding. One young woman asked me how I knew when to give up on a dream. I looked at her. Sometimes you don't. She waited. You changed the dream. She nodded. And how do you know when to leave a relationship? That question caught me off guard. Maya glanced at me. I smiled. When staying requires you to become someone you don't respect. The girl thought about it, then thanked me. I didn't know whether she understood, but I hoped she would remember. That evening, Maya and I drove home. The sun was setting behind the hills. She rested her hand on mine. You were good today. At giving advice? At being honest. I smiled. Honesty took me a while. It took all of us a while. We drove in silence. Then Maya said, do you ever wonder what your life would have looked like if the accident never happened? I thought about it. Yes. What do you imagine? I imagine I'd still be married. Happy. I hesitated. I don't know. She nodded. I don't either. I looked at her. But I don't want to live inside that question. Good. She squeezed my hand. Neither do I. That was the truth. There would always be alternate versions of our lives. The version where Claire never met Daniel. The version where I never left my marriage. The version where I never reopened my old invention. The version where Maya and I never met. But life isn't built from possibilities. It's built from choices. And every choice creates another road. I'd spent years staring backward at the road I didn't take. Now I prefer the one beneath my feet. A few weeks later, Claire sent one final message. It was short. I think I finally understand what you meant when you said you didn't belong to me anymore. You never did. You belonged to yourself. I hope you never forget that. I read it once, then deleted it. Not out of anger, because I didn't need to keep proof of closure. I had closure. It lived inside me. Years earlier, in a hospital room, Claire had whispered that she heard someone say she wasn't supposed to be driving that night. Those words changed our marriage. But they also changed me. Before the accident, I thought love meant protecting someone from pain. After the accident, I learned that real love requires honesty, even when honesty hurts. I thought loyalty meant staying, I learned that loyalty to another person should never require betrayal of yourself. I thought forgiveness meant opening the door again. I learned that forgiveness can simply mean putting down the anger and continuing forward. And I thought success meant proving everyone wrong. I learned that success is waking up and realizing you don't care whether they think you were right. That was my real victory. Not Daniel's downfall. Not Victor's regret. Not Claire's apology. Not even Northline's success. It was the morning I looked at my life and realized I no longer wanted anyone from my past to validate it. I had a wife who trusted me, a family we were building together, a company I believed in, friends who knew the real me, a workshop filled with young people who still believed their ideas could change something, and peace, real peace, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself. Sometimes I still dream about the accident. In the dream, I'm standing outside the hospital. The rain is falling. The lights are too bright. Someone is calling my name. Then I wake up. Maya is beside me. I reach for her hand, and every time, she wakes just enough to squeeze it. No questions, no fear, just presence. That's enough, because the woman who survived the wreck wasn't the only one who came out of that hospital changed. I did too. Claire survived the crash. Our marriage didn't. For a long time, I thought that was the tragedy. Now I understand it differently. The tragedy would have been surviving the wreck only to spend the rest of my life trapped inside a marriage where neither of us could tell the truth. Sometimes an ending is not a punishment. Sometimes it is an escape. Sometimes walking away isn't the moment you lose someone. It's the moment you stop losing yourself. And if you ask me what happened after everything ended, I won't tell you that I became powerful. I won't tell you I became rich. I won't tell you everyone who hurt me regretted it. Those things happened, but they aren't the story. The story is that one day I stopped waiting for someone else to understand my worth. I stopped trying to make the people who hurt me feel guilty. I stopped replaying old conversations. I stopped wondering what I could have done differently. And I started living. Quietly. Fully. Without permission. The greatest revenge wasn't watching them regret losing me. It was realizing that I no longer needed them to regret it. I had built a life they could never take from me. And when I looked at that life, I finally understood something simple. I didn't survive because my marriage survived. I survived because I learned that I could lose a life I thought was everything and still build another one worth living. That was the truth I had been searching for all along. And this time, I wasn't afraid of what came next.